On today's episode of Cubs 360, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Dodgers winning the 2024 World Series. We're going to talk about a coaching hire that the Chicago Cubs made, along with some other news regarding free agency and Cody Bellinger, who just opted into his contract. That's all coming up soon on Cubs 360. Cubs 360. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Jack. If you're interested in this content, feel free to like and subscribe to this channel, and also follow us on Twitter at Cubs 360. So, as I just mentioned, there's just a few things that we're going to talk about. A lot of news came out over the last week, and we're here to talk about it. So, we're going to start off with the news that obviously all of us know. The Los Angeles Dodgers, they won the 2024 World Series, defeating the New York Yankees, and they won it in 5 games. It was pretty much all Dodgers for most of the series. They came back in Game 5 to win the World Series. Congratulations to them. I'm no big advocate of the Los Angeles Dodgers, but they really made a lot of moves in free agency. As we know, they spent over $1 billion in free agency, and you got to give them credit where credit's due. They really assembled a really good roster, enough to win now, and they definitely did win now. They were able to come away with 98 wins, the most of any team in Major League Baseball, and they came away with a 3-2 series victory over the Padres, a 4-2 victory in the series over the Mets, and to top it off, a 4-1 victory in the World Series over the New York Yankees. So congratulations to Freddie Freeman for winning the MVP. He went through a lot over the summer with his child. Shohei Ohtani for winning the World Series. He came from the Los Angeles Angels, as everybody knows. And everybody else in that roster, Dave Roberts, the manager, and they actually win a World Series in a 162-game season. They haven't done that since 1988. Obviously, the 2020 World Series was the 60-game COVID sprint. So, again, congratulations to the Dodgers. Not really much to say here. And, so that's really all I got to say about the World Series. I mean, nothing really exciting that happened, except it was all Dodgers. If you're a Dodgers fan, obviously you like it. If you're a Yankees fan, not so much. Anyways, let's get to the major Cubs news that we are going to be talking about. Obviously, as most of you know, after the season, Craig Counsell and the Cubs parted ways with a vast majority of their coaching staff, and they were able to come away with their first replacement, I would say, for the offseason. So, as most of you know, the Chicago Cubs had a vacancy at their third base coach. Obviously, that was a huge issue for the Cubs, as their base running was not good. So what do? They hire one of the better people in the game in terms of base running, and they hire away the former first base and base running coach of the Milwaukee Brewers, Quinton Barry, to be the third base coach. So he's been the first base and base running coach for the last 4 seasons, obviously the first 3 from 2021-22 for Craig Counsell when he was the manager of the Brewers, and then this past year for Pat Murphy, who was the manager for the Brewers. So, obviously, we're just going to go through a little bit of stats here. Last year, the Brewers finished second in the majors with 217 stolen bases, behind only the Washington Nationals, who had only 6 more. It marked the second highest total in the season in Brewers history. Milwaukee led the league in base running runs above average, which was 19.7, and they were third in the league in stolen base success rate with an 83%. And they tied for third with a 33% run scoring rate, which was the percentage of times a base runner went on to score. So the Cubs, even though they weren't as good as the Brewers, nowhere even close to it, they ended up with 143 steals, which was 8th in the league. Base running runs above average was 10.7, which was tied for 4th. And they also had an 83% stolen base rate, which was tied 4th in the league. They had 59 outs on the bases, which was only less than the Reds for that area for most in the majors. So that means their base running was really bad last year. Obviously, everybody knew that. It was a huge issue that needed to be addressed, as that was a huge issue for the Cubs, like I just said. So bringing in a guy like Quinton Barry, who is very experienced with this and one of the better guys in the league, is a huge A+. And on top of that, stealing away from the Milwaukee Brewers makes it a bit sweeter, doesn't it? So Barry is 39 years old. He obviously worked for the first base coach under Craig Counsell and Pat Murphy for the Milwaukee Brewers. Before, he served as a minor league outfield and base running coordinator for the team the previous two. And during his entire tenure as the first base and base running coach for the Brewers, Milwaukee ranked third in MLB with steals with 524 and base running runs above average, which was 30.3. So, again, like I said, he has done a phenomenal job with the Milwaukee Brewers, and as much as I don't like the Brewers, got to give him credit for doing what they've been doing with base running. So, the fact that we're able to see Chicago invest in this is huge, because it was a huge issue for the Cubs last year, and being able to bring in a guy with that expertise and the resume that he has is amazing. So I really like this hire for third base. Obviously, Willie Harris was the guy with David Ross, but he had to stay for Craig Counsell's year. Now Craig Counsell is being able to bring in his guys, and he's bringing in quality hires to help improve this team. I'd love to see it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the next few hires are for the Cubs. But to start it off with, Quinton Barry is really phenomenal. So let's move on here. We're going to talk about Cody Bellinger right now, because that is the big news that came out just a few hours ago, believe it or not. So he exercised his player option for the Cubs for the 2025 season. It is a $27.5 million deal for the first year of his contract, but again, that's pretty much essentially his opt-in salary, which was a lot more than what he was worth last year. He really struggled after that really good 2023 campaign, his first year with the Cubs. So his second year, first with Craig Counsell, not as great. He can also play first base. He can play the outfield. He can play DH. You could play almost anywhere in that area. So he's hoping for a bounce-back year. Obviously, the agent was pretty adamant that he couldn't get more than that out on the open market, so that's why he opted in. So this also does a lot for the team in terms of what their free agent plans are, because if he opted out, which it seemed like was going to happen, because it seemed like there was going to be a sense of that. Cody Bellinger seemed like he was looking to find a way to get more money out there, but obviously with the struggling year that he did, he wasn't going to get that money. So I do believe if he does play well, maybe he opts out and he does find more money out on the market, but it just wasn't going to be this year. And now that changes a lot for the Cubs offseason plans, because unless you make a couple of trades, it looks like you're going to be rolling out with a similar, if not the exact same roster from last season, at the end of last season, to be more exact. So we'll see what happens with that. But Cody Bellinger right now, like I said, he had a big 2023 campaign, so we're going to see what that does. Obviously, he opted in, and the guy that did opt out for the Cubs was Drew Smyly, and we'll get to him a little bit later. But, I mean, if Cody Bellinger can play at a high level like he did in the 2023 season, I do think this is a bit of a steal, but then you're probably risking him going in free agency next year. So we'll see what happens with that, but welcome back, I guess, to Chicago, Cody Bellinger, and let's get to the big news of it all, which is free agency, which is right around the corner. We're going to go over some targets that the Chicago Cubs could be looking at, and we're going to go over some realistic and some unrealistic targets as well. So we're going to start with the realistic ones, and obviously the one that myself as a fan have been pretty adamant about hoping we can get is the number one pitcher out on the market, and that is Baltimore Orioles ace Corbin Burns. So he actually has a connection with Craig Counsell. Obviously, as most of you know, Corbin Burns came from the Milwaukee Brewers, has that connection with Craig Counsell, so I do think that alone makes a bit of sense. But not just that, he does have a 15-9 record with the Orioles last year with a 2.92 ERA. He's obviously going to be the most sought-after free agent pitcher on the market, but it would reunite him, like I just said, with Craig Counsell. But most importantly, and I want to get to this more than anything, signing Corbin Burns would give Chicago the rotation a right-handed ace starting pitcher to go along with its two aces from the left side in Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga. That is alone the biggest thing. So the Cubs really do need a right-handed pitcher. They do have two of those in Javier Assad and Jameson Taillon, but they aren't really on the same tier as obviously Corbin Burns, but I would even say Imanaga and Justin Steele. So having Corbin Burns, who is a right-handed ace, definitely balances out that starting lineup, and having Burns, Steele, and Imanaga in your top three would be one of the best top half starting rotations in the National League, if not the entire MLB. So hopefully we could potentially see that. I would be a big fan of Corbin Burns. But like I said, it is going to have to cost him a lot. And is the ownership willing to go to maybe the $200 million threshold that he might be seeking in free agency? So I do think the Cubs could be able to do what it takes to get it done, but we'll see. Another guy that maybe seems a little bit unrealistic now that Cody Bellinger opted in is Anthony Santander. He's 30 years old. He was teammates with Burns in 2024. He is a right fielder. And obviously, he isn't like a big name guy, but he did hit 44 home runs, and he drove in 102 runs, so 102 RBIs. So a bat like that to provide a little bit more power is huge. So additionally, the Cubs ranked 20th in the MLB in home runs hit, so they were in the bottom half of the league with that, so that's not great. But unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to happen now, especially because Cody Bellinger opted into his contract. It doesn't really look like we're going to be able to get any more offensive players unless you're making trades. However, one scenario that I could see is if Michael Busch, even then that's pretty unrealistic because there's a ton of free agents that you can go after. So you could really mix and match a ton of scenarios here, and I'll go over those in a minute too. So Anthony Santander is an option at right field. Max Fried is another guy that's a pitcher from the Atlanta Braves, but the problem that I have with him is he's a lefty and he struggles to stay healthy. If those are the two things. If he can't stay healthy, I don't understand how the Cubs are going to be able to really give him what he wants because they really need a lot of consistency, but even then the left-handedness is really a bit of an issue for the Chicago Cubs because we had Justin Steele and Shota Imanaga. You don't want all lefties. You want a bit of righties so you can be able to balance out that starting rotation. That's why Corbin Burns makes so much sense for the Chicago Cubs. But even then, he had an 11-10 record with a 3.25 ERA, which was his worst ERA since the 2019 season, which was 4.02. But he's never had back-to-back bad seasons, so hopefully you're looking at a decent season from him next year. But again, Atlanta's going to try to re-sign him. The Mets are going to look at him. The Los Angeles Dodgers, because they go after everybody. Those are guys that are going to be able there. And I would even say Baltimore could look at him since Corbin Burns may not even go back to Baltimore. So you could look at Max Fried as an option there if you're the Orioles. But I just don't think it makes enough sense for the Chicago Cubs because he's left-handed and he struggles to stay healthy. If he struggles to stay healthy, I don't understand if you could be able to get him. Now we're going to go to a reliever. He's a left-handed reliever. His name is Tanner Scott, who split his season with the Miami Marlins. They got traded to the San Diego Padres. So he's a left-handed reliever who's one of the best relief pitchers in all of baseball last year. He posted a 1.75 ERA, which was fifth best for qualified relievers. And obviously, like I said, he pitched for the Marlins and the Padres. He got traded to San Diego at the deadline. So much like Burns and Fried would do for Chicago's starting rotation, it would add velocity to the left side to a Cubs bullpen that desperately needs it. The only left-handed bullpen pitcher that we had was Drew Smyly, who was awful last year, and like I just said, he opted out of his contract, which makes total sense because they designated him for assignment. Nobody picked him up, so he was still with Chicago, and he just did worse. There was a lot of blown saves from this team, and we just really need to address the relief pitching, especially on the left side, because we have a ton of righties on the relief side and a ton of lefties in the starting rotation. So, again, Tanner Scott might be able to command a bit of money because he is one of the better relievers in the game, especially with the ERA that he had. So, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Tanner Scott is a really good addition here, but again, we just have to see. And then finally, a guy, and this isn't really pitching, I'll go over a couple batters too, is Carlos Estevez. So he actually was on the Los Angeles Angels. He got traded to the Philadelphia Phillies at the deadline. He is a closer. He collected 26 saves on the year and posted a career-best 2.45 ERA, making him one of the top closers on the market. And like I just said, he was a mid-season acquisition by Philly, and he served as a closer through the second half of the year as well as the postseason. Estevez has a really solid ERA, like I said, 26 saves. And like I said, Chicago had way too many blown saves throughout the year, and that is why we lost a lot of games. If you just save like maybe even half of those, you're looking at a 90-win team. Not only just 90 wins, a team that makes the playoffs, and in addition, they potentially win the division because the Brewers were only 10 games better than us, and with those blown saves, we lose I think it was 20-something games that we lost because of blown saves. I'm not going to say we're going to win 20 games if we don't blow those saves because at the end of the day, that really might not be the case. But what I will say about it is if you are able to save half of those, you potentially win the division or at the very least make the playoffs. So if you're able to address the relief pitching and the closer position, because it was Porter Hodge and he was a rookie. He didn't do bad, but he wasn't really a certified closer. He came in for Hector Neris, who was god-awful. They designated him for assignment in the middle of the season, and then Porter Hodge comes in. Estevez would definitely be able to help out with that, and I believe he's a left-handed pitcher too. He's a righty, so my mistake on that. He's a right-handed pitcher, but regardless, if you could get a closer that saved 26 games with the ERA that he had, that is amazing. But like I said, what is the money going to look like? So that's another conversation to be had. And look, not all these are going to be realistic. I'll go over a couple of free agent targets that the Chicago Cubs will look at. And there'll be a couple batters because, again, you're going to need some offense. And people were talking about some power hitters. But the problem that I had with it is, who is it going to be? It's obviously not going to be Juan Soto now because Cody Bellinger opted into his contract, and it just really doesn't have a position open for Juan Soto. And on top of that, Juan Soto is going to be commanding probably $600 million in free agency. He's really young. He's really good. Don't get me wrong. But the problem is there's not a position available for him. And on top of that, I don't think the Cubs are going to be willing to spend the money that Juan Soto is looking for in free agency. So that too, and then I also want to talk about Pete Alonso because I know he's been in rumors for the longest of time with the Chicago Cubs. Unless you're really going to move a lot of players around, I just don't think Pete Alonso makes that much sense anymore because you have Seiya Suzuki and Cody Bellinger that are probably going to be mixing and matching the right field and designated hitter positions, and they have Michael Busch at first base. So unless you're moving on from Michael Busch, which I don't even know if that's realistic anymore, and Cody Bellinger plays first, then I don't know what the situation is going to be. You could maybe even put Pete Alonso at first and then move on from Michael Busch. There's so many different combinations that are out there, so I just don't even know if Pete Alonso makes that much sense anymore. And another guy that I was going to bring up, Santander. He's a right fielder for the Orioles, like I said. 44 home runs, 102 runs batted in. That is phenomenal. I think it would be a great idea. It would be brilliant if we were able to bring him in. But this is the problem, though. Now that you brought in Cody Bellinger, how are you going to do that? So unless you move on from Michael Busch, which, again, he had a decent year. Is he like the superstar first baseman like Pete Alonso? No. But he was very serviceable for the Cubs. And people talk about trying to find the next Anthony Rizzo. And people are saying Michael Busch could be that guy. So am I comparing to Anthony Rizzo? Is he the next Anthony Rizzo? Absolutely not. But I do believe Michael Busch is really good. I believe he won a Gold Glove too. So that alone really shows like how good of a player Michael Busch is. So again, moving on from him, unless you're getting some good value, I don't really think it makes all too much sense. So I don't know if Santander is a realistic option as well as Pete Alonso. And then, another guy that they were talking about is Vladdy Guerrero Jr. His future in Toronto is a bit in limbo. But again, whether it's through trade, because I don't know what exactly his contract is. Otherwise, you're trading for him, which is going to cost a lot of assets. Or you have to sign him, which is also going to cost a lot of money. So that's going to be a big issue for the Chicago Cubs. What are they going to do at first base? And how is the outfield position going to work? How is the DH position? Who's going to be at the DH? Who's going to play at first? Because it doesn't really look like Michael Busch is going to be the confirmed first baseman for the Cubs next season, even though realistically he might be. Because you could put Cody Bellinger there. You could sign Pete Alonso if you wanted to, which, again, you could say what you want about that. Or you have Santander at right, Cody Bellinger at first, or whatever it is. Either way, Cody Bellinger's on this team, which really moves around a ton of things for the Chicago Cubs. So we'll see what happens with that. And again, we're going to see what happens with the starting pitching. Is Corbin Burns a realistic target? And how are they going to really address the bullpen? Because that is a real issue for the Cubs. Tanner Scott, like I said, is going to cost a lot of money. But regardless, the bullpen was awful last year in my opinion. Or at least from what I saw. I know the statistics actually said it looked decent. But regardless, they need an upgrade. Because if you want to make the playoffs, you need a good bullpen. You need to get those saves from your closer. And we just did not get that last year. So we'll see what happens with that. And the starting rotation, like I said, with Javier Saad and Jameson Taillon, with Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele. Who's that fifth starter going to be? Maybe Corbin Burns. Maybe Max Fried, even Blake Snell, even though he's a lefty, or even Jack Flaherty from the Dodgers, because like I said, I think he could be a realistic target. He was really good for the Dodgers in that playoff run in the World Series. So we'll see what happens there. But regardless, and what Cubs fans can agree with me on is Jed Hoyer has a lot of work to do. They have to still fill out their coaching staff. They have to fill out their lineup, their 40-man roster. So nothing is really set in stone just yet. And like I said, it's November the 2nd, so there's a lot of time for the Chicago Cubs to make moves. So we're going to see what happens. Anything can happen at this point. So it's all just a wait-and-see game. Free agency is right around the corner. I'm looking really forward to it. Comment down below your thoughts on what the Chicago Cubs could be doing this offseason. Comment down below your thoughts on the hire of Quinton Barry as their third base coach. Obviously, I am a huge fan of this. The base running will definitely be a lot better. Comment down below your thoughts on Cody Bellinger and what that means for free agent targets. So that's all I have for now. This is Jack from Cubs 360, but most importantly, go Cubs go.